All right, today we've got an incredible story for you. It's about one of the most iconic trains in the world, the 500 Series Shinkansen. And this isn't just a story about speed, it's about a seemingly impossible challenge and a solution that came from, well, a place you would never, ever expect.
Yeah, I know. It sounds like the start of a bad joke, right? But the answer to this question literally changed the future of high-speed rail. So let's dig in and unravel this engineering mystery together.
So, before we get to the solution, we really have to get a handle on the problem. Let's rewind the clock to the early 1990s. In Japan, the J.R. West Railway Company was in an all-out war for survival against a huge competitor, the airlines. And this chart right here shows you the heart of their problem. It was something called the 4-hour wall. See, all the research showed that if a train trip takes more than 4 hours, pretty much every business traveler is just going to fly instead. So, to win back that crucial Osaka to Hakata route, J.R. West had to smash through that wall. This wasn't just about getting a little faster, this was about survival.
So the goal was simple enough on paper: get the train to an operating speed of 300 kilometers per hour. But, and this is a huge but, there was a massive catch. They couldn't just throw more power at it. They had to hit that record-breaking speed while also being incredibly, almost impossibly quiet. And that one little requirement, it changed absolutely everything. Because, you see, the real enemy in this story wasn't a lack of technology or a rival company. No, the true villain was something totally invisible. It was the sound created by all that speed. And this number is what kept the engineers up at night: 75 decibels. The Japanese Environment Agency had, and still has, some of the strictest noise regulations in the world. And it makes sense, right? These high-speed trains are zipping right through dense neighborhoods. The absolute non-negotiable noise limit was 75 decibels.
Now, to put that in perspective for you, 75 decibels is about as loud as your average household vacuum cleaner. So just think about that for a second. The challenge was to make a massive 16-car metal train, weighing hundreds of tons and blasting along at 300 kilometers an hour, as quiet as a Hoover. Yeah, a lot of engineers thought that was just flat out impossible. And this is exactly why it was so hard. The physics here are just brutal. Wind noise, what engineers call aerodynamic noise, doesn't just go up a little bit with speed, it goes up exponentially. It's proportional to the speed to the power of 6 or even 8. That means every single kilometer per hour you add, the noise problem gets dramatically worse. It's a nightmare. But the biggest, loudest, most explosive problem of them all was something called the tunnel boom. And with nearly half the train line running inside tunnels, this was an absolute deal breaker. Here's how it works. The train flies into a tunnel and basically acts like a giant piston in a cylinder. It compresses this huge wave of air in front of it. That wave travels at the speed of sound, gets steeper and steeper until it becomes a shockwave. And then, boom, it erupts from the other end of the tunnel with an explosion so loud it could rattle windows 400 meters away. So, with all the usual engineering tricks hitting a brick wall, the project needed a completely fresh idea. And that idea came from this man, J.R. West's General Manager of Technical Development, Eiji Nakatsu. And it turns out, he was also a passionate birdwatcher. He found his solution not in an engineering textbook, but out in nature. The big breakthrough, the aha moment, came from this one little line and a report from a junior engineer. When the train enters the tunnel, it feels like it shrinks. Now, most people would just ignore that, right? But Nakatsu realized what that shrinking feeling was. It was the train suddenly slamming into a wall of much higher air resistance. That sudden change in pressure, that was the root cause of the tunnel boom. And that led him to ask this absolutely brilliant question. What living creature out there smoothly manages a sudden dramatic change in resistance, like, say, going from the thin air into dense water? And the answer immediately came to him. A bird that dives for its prey with almost no splash at all. The kingfisher. And that right there was the turning point. Nakatsu and his team launched a formal study into what we now call biomimicry, basically looking to nature for engineering blueprints. So let's break down how they copied the designs of 3 different birds to solve 3 completely separate problems. Okay, so first up, the kingfisher's beak. Think about it. A blunt shape hitting the water creates a massive splash, a big pressure wave. But the kingfisher's beak is long and tapered. It parts the water gradually, which minimizes that pressure spike.
The engineers realized this was the exact same principle they needed to slice through the air inside a tunnel without creating a massive shockwave. So using this idea, they designed this radical 15-meter-long nose cone that looked almost exactly like a kingfisher's beak. And just look at these results. Air resistance dropped by a massive 30%. That, in turn, cut electricity use by 15%. And the most important part? The tunnel boom was gone. Completely eliminated. It was an absolutely staggering success. But you know how it is, you solve one big problem and it just reveals the next biggest one. With the tunnel boom silenced, the loudest part of the train was now the pantograph. That's the arm on top that gets power from the overhead wires. At 300 kilometers an hour, it was creating something called Kármán vortices. You can think of them as these turbulent little whirlpools of air that create a really loud howling sound. So Nakatsu went back to his bird books. This time, he looked for a silent hunter, the owl. And the secret to an owl's totally silent flight is the serrated, comb-like edge on its feathers. You can see it here. These little serrations break up one big, noisy vortex of air into lots of tiny, quiet micro-vortices. So the team literally copied that design, carving serrations into the pantograph. And guess what? It worked like a charm. And for one final bit of polish, the team wanted to streamline the support shaft for that pantograph. And for this, they looked to an animal that has arguably one of the most hydrodynamically perfect shapes on the planet, the Adelie penguin. Its smooth, spindle-shaped body is perfect for moving through water, and it turned out to be just as good for helping that shaft cut through the air with almost no drag. So you combine the beak of a kingfisher, the wings of an owl, and the body of a penguin, and what do you get? You get a technical masterpiece. It solved every single engineering problem they set out to fix. But as we're about to find out, this absolute aerodynamic perfection created a whole new set of very real-world problems. When the 500 series finally debuted in 1997, it was a global phenomenon. I mean, it hit its 300-kilometer-per-hour target, tying the French TGV for the title of world's fastest train. It completely demolished that 4-hour wall, cutting the trip from Osaka to Hakata down to just 2 hours and 17 minutes. And, most importantly for the business, it successfully lured customers away from the airlines. By every single technical measure, it was a home run. But here's the twist. The design was so laser-focused on being perfect aerodynamically that it was actually kind of terrible to operate. That perfectly circular, tube-like body, it meant cramped interiors with curved walls that passengers didn't love. That giant 15-meter nose, it meant far fewer seats in the most valuable car. The doors were in weird places, which messed with boarding on standard platforms, and to top it all off, it was astronomically expensive to build. So after debuting as the absolute star of the fleet, its practical flaws meant it was pulled from the top-tier long-distance routes in just 13 years. It got replaced by newer, more practical, and frankly, more boring designs. And while it's still a huge fan favorite running on slower regional services, its time in the spotlight was surprisingly brief for such a revolutionary machine. But here's the real legacy, and it's a powerful one. Even though the 500 series train itself is slowly fading into retirement, its design DNA is everywhere. That owl-wing-inspired pantograph, it's now standard issue on newer Shinkansen. But more importantly, this project proved to the world that biomimicry wasn't just some weird, quirky idea. It was a serious, powerful engineering principle that is now at the very core of high-speed rail design around the globe. And that really leaves us with a fascinating final thought, doesn't it? The story of this silent bullet train shows us that nature has basically been running a research and development lab for millions of years. It just makes you wonder, what other huge, complex, seemingly impossible human problems are we facing right now, where the solution is just waiting for us, right outside, if we only knew how to look?